Welcome to Sovereign Souls, a special podcast sponsored by the Spirit Release Academy with your hosts, Jonno Webster and Andy Porter.
And that's one of the things you're very drawn to do, isn't it? Where your passion is to research this some more.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely, I think it goes through my mind probably about 500 times a day. I've got notes all over the place. I'm trying to string together. I look at that crazy meme with the guy from like Always Sunny who's like, hold on. And one of the great things about the group, which I cannot emphasize the importance of the group enough, there is something very, very special about our meetings that we have. And just a couple of side notes, right? I had there was a dog that I just presented to the group in conversation. I was like, hey, does anybody get a read on, you're hanging out with all the mediums and stuff, all the cool kids. And you ask them like, hey, does anybody have a read on this dog? Maybe it's got heartworm diagnosis. So the dog did have a heartworm diagnosis. I just brought it up to the group, had a couple of people look in on it. They just did a little quick check, conversationally, just friends to friends. And we have paperwork showing that this dog had heartworm. And when it went in next time, the heartworm was gone, which is amazing. We're just like, there's no more heartworm. And that is just a bunch of friends gathering together once or twice a week, just, learning from one another.
Yes, I mean, the group that you're referring to is when we have practitioners go through the certification, we have kind of community groups on a Tuesday and a Wednesday evening where the practitioners come in. It's a safe space for them to discuss different cases, different pieces of work, and where, like you're saying, you've got an opportunity to have this safe discussion where you can work as a community and help dogs.
Yeah. Well, a cat too. My cat had one eye that pupil wasn't dilating. And after they looked at my cat, both pupils started dilating again. And I don't know. See, this is where it's like, scientifically, I want to justify all the possible reasons. But I really don't have it. I don't really know how to look at it. There's so many consistencies. So when it happens over and over, well then, what then? And the group is incredibly important. I think that us as practitioners making sure to touch base with one another is what keeps us strong and protected. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, because I think the thing is, certainly working with Terry, Dr. Palmer, he was very much on the science basis. And the evidence and the proof in getting it through to academia, this is where his passion was, wasn't it? He was just incredible at that.
Yeah, Dr. P, that was his whole life, really. And every hour of his waking day, his conversations were around how do we get into the medical area? How do we get this into academics? How do we get people to study and do the research? So he was kind of pushing this huge snowball, I guess, uphill for so long, really. And it's kind of got to the point that we sort of feel we're at the top of that hill now, and we're starting to go along that kind of plateau. And people like yourself, Miriam, are going to be instrumental in helping us to be able to produce the right wording and the right narrative for academics to look at this work in a kind of sensible way, as opposed to, it's spiritual, so it's got to be woo-woo. Well, but as you said, it's evidence-based. So if we work on the evidence shows us that this work works, and people like yourself that obviously aren't potentially mediums or not potentially woo-woo are saying this works. And I think that's what gives us such a big opportunity, looping people like you into the work and the academy. And that's what makes us excited, isn't it, really?
I think it's incredible, because just to go back, Miriam, when you were going through the training, we're very lucky. We have some very, very good people coming through the training systems within the academy. But just on you, when we did that session that night and we started bringing in the actual practice, we'd gone past the theory, we're now doing the practical work. And you did bring in your family member. And I remember putting it into the groups where the people coming through were going to do the clearing for your sister. And then obviously afterwards, we just had our normal evening. We carried on talking, we carried on teaching, we carried on speaking and communicating with you guys. And that was it. That was just a normal evening for us. And then a few days later, I just got this little message coming through from Miriam. So, and it simply, and I always remember it, it simply said, "You've got me for life." And I had no idea what this message was about. And I was thinking, have you just messaged the wrong person? Have you? Do you know what I mean? I was like, why would one of our students message me that? That just doesn't make sense at all. And I was sort of in the Academy HQ where we are, and I was thinking, what reference has that got? I've got no idea. And then, of course, we had our next evening of training, and you came in there, and you so emotionally reported back on the work that the students had done for your sister. And one of the things with myself and Andy is that it's kind of like you get complacent, because we've both been doing this work for in excess of 20 years, and we're used to what the guides can do. We're used to hearing feedback, but it always hits us. And you never lose the humbleness of the feedback from someone that comes in and means it. And for you to describe the way that you did about the effects of your sister and what it meant to you and your family, and it was just, it's a constant reminder why we do this. And not just do this, but why we train it, why we have people all around the world now doing exactly what you're doing, Miriam, creating miracles, doing this work in incredible levels of standard. And, you know, we're so lucky to have you working in the Academy, because your passion just comes through. And we know that with your education and the quality that you're going to bring in, this is going to help so many people that are vulnerable, that are, like you say, you know, there are different ways of healing, but this is one that works, and it doesn't, it's affordable, it's easily accessed, and the effects are instant. And this is why we're so lucky to have people like you. And
I think it's probably worth saying as well, really, from my perspective, when we hear that story, we're not talking about seasoned certified practitioners like ourselves that have been doing it 20 years. These are new practitioners that have only just been trained. They're literally fresh out of the kind of gates, really, and that's the impact they can have. And it is a phenomenal story, to be fair.
Yeah, that was the first practical session during our 8-week training.
Yeah, so these are people that have been through 6 weeks of training effectively, and then the first time they actually get to do something, that's the effect. And it kind of shows you how this has to kind of explode out into the world, really, and out into the academic level as well as science and the medical profession. And as I think you just sort of said earlier, Miriam, we need to bring all these things together. We don't see what we do as a magic bullet that fixes everything, but it's certainly a part of a fix, and certainly part of, you know, that kind of treatment that can help someone that's suffering in such a terrible way on the kind of road to recovery, really. And that's what I think that's how we see things, mate. And that's our job, is to find how we can do that, really.
Yeah, I mean, even this is the quietest podcast I've been on. and it's because I knew the story. You know, you've already explained it to me, to us. You know, but just listening to is, sometimes you just need to shut up and listen. And I think that's where what you have said, Miriam, is so powerful. But Andy and I are very used to this, and you just blow us away with how you talk about it.
And one of the other interesting things is, you know, when I began my quest in psychology, I left an aerospace career, a good solid government contractor, you know, working for the war machine, doing the things. I left. It wasn't serving my soul. I lost a few friends to drugs and alcohol, and it really, really impacted me. One of them was my best friend, and she told me just before her passing what she was seeing, and she was an alcoholic. And she did not make it to her 40th birthday. And that really impacts, I see addiction, and then maybe it's because I'm in California, everybody's trying to soothe, everybody's trying to feel empowered, everybody's trying to be the thinnest, the prettiest, the best, it's LA. It's a tough place to be when it comes to people and human interaction. And a lot of people have turned to substances. It seems to be a real common factor in my narrative, but it's also one of those things where it's like you almost have to watch someone die slowly. And you just want to help them. That's how any family member feels when it comes to this. And to say they have no option, the person has to decide to come around to it. It's so challenging. It's so incredibly challenging. Even once an addict is so far in, they wish they could stop. They can't stop. They lack the ability to stop for some reason. Another person that I recently cleared, I'm kind of monitoring this one before I can say fully, but he was a heroin addict for probably over 10, 15 years. And that addiction, man, he wasn't able to feel high anymore. It was just strictly to carry on such a physical dependency. Life brought a person to a place where there was a medical emergency, ended up in hospital, had an organ removed. And window of opportunity from me as a SRT practitioner, I was contacted, and he was saying he was very scared. Felt very scared, felt very vulnerable, because he was right by this big cemetery for the veterans called Forest Lawn. And I said, all right, well, maybe, he's obviously not on the drugs anymore. He's not on the heroin anymore. So I was like, well, this is the time. This is the time. I just felt called to do a clearing for him. Contacted him the day after, and I said, how are you doing today? And he said, sometimes he was very fearful the night before. And then he's like, sometimes you have some good days and some bad days. He's like, today was a good day. And I was like, is that so? I was like, well, we did a clearing on you. He's like, oh, thank you so much. And the behavior started changing from a very selfish, self-oriented person to somebody he was giving his last dollar to this kid. I wish I could explain more about that, but basically doing these very compassionate, very giving kind of things, which is not a part of the baseline, but maybe it was inside of him, but these addictions. And so far, still sober in a recuperative care home, seems to be very excited, called me and said, I'm going to start getting on a diet. I'm going to start, focusing on my health and fitness. I do feel like, especially with addicts, when they decide to start doing fitness, it's a very good sign because it means that they want to feel strong themselves. And I think that that's a really big factor. I think, heroin use is somebody trying to compensate. It's a false sense of peace. Methamphetamine use is a false sense of power. So when they start to engage in behaviors that bring that in themselves, all of a sudden, you see that they are working to fulfill that in a natural way without the substances, and they can see it. So I'm very excited to be tracking and keeping track of this one once, he gets out of recuperative care, if he's going to continue to maintain. But I just think there's a really, one side of the thing is very, very powerful for people coming out of addiction. And, if you've ever had a loved one who suffered from this, knowing that there's a possibility to help them maintain that sobriety, see that life is worth living. And I mean, amazing. It's just, there is something to help. And sometimes I just want to tell people that I said, there is something to help when we feel hopeless, caring about people in a suffering place, or, let's say a kid is suicidality. Put one girl's name in that was cutting, and she didn't even get picked up by the group. But just as you were saying to me, the power of the healing book, she stopped cutting and started working out by the next day. I thought for sure she got put in for a clearing. But no, it was just that easy for these things to run, because that is the power of the group. The intention behind it is we are coming and you will have to go. And sometimes they flee, I guess, It's just so many coincidences.
Yeah.
I think we hear that all the time, Miriam. Actually, quite often people say, I booked a clearing session and then I didn't really need the clearing session when it was booked because I'd been cleared before. So it's like as soon as the intention is there to want help, as you said, and to be cleared, the guides come in basically like a kind of swooping team And effectively, quite a lot of people all instantly start feeling better before they've actually had their clearing. And it is kind of a testament to this work that these negative entities and energies are driving this horrendous addictive and suicidal sometimes and self-harm behavior. And we definitely need to float this into the general public's kind of conscious awareness, really, to understand that this is what's happening. And people that have these really difficult addictions, the first step is to find sovereignty and clarity.
And I think, like you were saying, Miriam, is that it does take the individual to want change as well. But what this does do is it gives a window of opportunity. It gives a window of a clear energy, a clear thought process, a clear sovereign energetic body, as we would call it. And that window of opportunity can be grabbed. And if it is grabbed, there is just undoubtedly, well, it's a miracle healing, isn't it? You really can see addictions change.
And so many different facets of the world, even just when, people watching or observing behavior. Once you come to the realization that this is going on, that there are energetic things tugging and controlling us to some degree or another, or influencing us, because I believe they come in by way of provocation. In one facet, I'm sure there are many routes, but one facet is by way of provocation. It's like you shake hands with it, like they antagonize. And if something comes along and antagonizes you and you kind of fall into, fighting back against it or engaging with it, it's almost like there's a bit of a handshake there, and it's so easy. We're all humans. We all do it. It's unavoidable. The part that once you put it into your mind and into your way of life is that if and when these things happen, you can get rid of them. You can decide if you understand how to cleanse and clear, if you understand how to choose your own sovereignty and continue to choose your own sovereignty. Now you have an opportunity to say, oh, okay, I may be engaged with that. It was a nasty thing. It was a nasty person, or it was nasty energy. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. The maintenance, once you understand it, it can be, just depending on, what happens to come on around. But, when you're part of this team, I know that one of the areas I'm going to be going into probably with my clinical is either going to be treatment for addiction or the prison system, both of which are near me. And of course, my family was like, well, aren't you worried about what you may pick up working with people in the prison system? And I wasn't because I was like, I have the team. I have the team, and this is where we need to go to be able to actually study change. And one of the efficacy of this treatment, so let's say we treat somebody or something like that, how are they doing now? I mean, it's a perfectly controlled experimental environment. It's just a little unethical. I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but I've considered it, okay? Because what they did give a bunch of prisoners psilocybin. I also am very interested in psychedelics, but that's a very long road for psychedelics to ever become really something solid. We're trying, and people are trying. So they gave prisoners psilocybin, and it changed them. It fundamentally changed them. They were actually more positive. They were less aggressive. There's research on this. And how fascinating is that? It's like all of a sudden you just bring in this one component, and you're changing the outlook of the prisoners to some extent. Well, does that then mean that there's these internal mechanisms, these possible energies, these attachments that are affecting these individuals and preventing them from being able to, and there's no way to say yes or no really at this point. Scientific validation pending. But yeah, I think it's possible to explore that, especially with prisoner reform. When these guys come out, or gals, when they come out, it's going to be hard for them. It's going to be a hard road. They're going to have to adapt. They're going to have to survive. That's not very easy. They're going to have to maintain that hope. They're going to have to revisit who they are. It's very complicated. And it's in these places where people are really needing help changing that a process like this could really help them through that adjustment period. And once they're there, then they're there. And it's on them, and they, carry forward. And I see a lot of use for it. I see a lot of ways that we can adapt this to, life, aside from just, stressed out people and anxious people and people that need to ground and, the normal, we call them regular neurotics, just.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. It's not just about the individuals, it's about family members, friends, associates. This can help anybody and everybody, can't it? So Miriam, you've been very open, very honest. And, thank you so much because, it's a personal journey that you've been on. It's a personal experience that you've had and a very emotive experience. And, to come onto a podcast that's there for the general public and explain this, honestly, thank you so much from both of us. Thank you so much from the point of view of the Academy for your openness and your honesty. And we just really look forward to working with you again because you're a great character to work with. The passion behind your work is incredible. And we know that this is going to make a difference to so many people. So thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, it's been great. And obviously
you
speak generally better than we do, Miriam. So thanks for that. Which is really good.
I appreciate that, guys.
It's probably the podcast that we've needed to say the least amount on so far. So you've excelled yourself, and thank you for your time because we do appreciate that.
Yeah.
It is time and everyone's busy. So so thank you for being candid and open.
Thank you, man.
No problem, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This podcast is sponsored by the Spirit Release Academy. To learn more information about the Academy and their ongoing courses, please visit spiritreleaseacademy.com.